So, welcome to Women Who Fights podcast. We empower female fighters to take full agency over their training. Our goal is to celebrate and inspire others with the incredible action women and allies are taking to level the playing field. We talk to experts, uncover prejudice, and champion what's driving our progress.
And today we have Teanna Taylor with us. She's a blue belt under Stealth BJJ. And after moving to Madrid in 2016, she set up two fully bilingual clubs in the city. And as well as running these with her partner, she also set up a project that combines training BJJ and sightseeing in Madrid. The dream. Off the mat, Teanna works in academia, specializing in academic English at both master's and PhD level. Whoa. A little bit of commentator.
Teanna has dealt with a lot of challenges in her life, including both severe physical and mental health issues. The way she's developed these mental health problems is really important to understand, as it could happen to anyone. But it's not often discussed, and we're really keen to open up this conversation.
We really need to know more about it because it's so vital that we start discussing things that are not discussed. So, Teanna, thank you for coming. Could you start by telling us your story, like how your mental health issues developed? What happened? Tell us.
Well, actually, I'd like to preface this first by saying me coming on here has had a mixed reaction. Some people have been really supportive. Some people have said, don't do it. It's a really bad idea. There was a world-class black belt in the States said to me, never speak about this in public. You will be vilified, and especially as a woman, do not talk about it. But I'm having a little bit of faith in humanity that I'm going to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
I started to fall physically ill it was late 2017, and that's when I first started competing in jiu-jitsu. So I was really excited because I wanted to compete for quite a long time before, but it just didn't happen. And in the run up to the competitions, I was feeling really, really tired, and I didn't think too much of it. I thought, well, I'm working a lot, I'm training a lot, but I was also sleeping a lot as well. And on the day of the competition, I felt pretty weak, but again, I didn't attribute it to anything specific.
Yeah.
Loved my first competition. I got tapped in, I think, 1 minute 15 seconds, but it was amazing. It was amazing.
Where was it?
This was in Guadalajara in Madrid, not in Mexico. Because when my coach at the time said to me, Teanna, there's a competition in Guadalajara, I was thinking Mexico's a bit far to travel for my first BJJ comp.
I think, wow.
Yeah. So then 2 months later, I competed in Malaga. And I was aware in the run up to the competition that my heart wasn't beating properly. It was beating very, very slowly. But again, I was really run down and I tried not to think too much of it. But the night before the competition, my heart was beating really fast. And I thought, well, this is strange because I've competed now. So why do I feel like this? And I thought, again, I wasn't experienced in competing. I just put it down to nerves. On the day itself, I didn't feel well at all. I managed to win gold. But again, even afterwards, I didn't feel like my heart was beating properly. And my partner and I drove back to Madrid, and I went into work the next day, taught my lessons as normal. But I felt like I was outside of my body because my heart again was beating really, really slowly. I managed to get the metro home, and it felt like the longest 10 minutes of my life trying to get to my house. I was just thinking, I need to lie down. Everything was going in slow motion. And it was actually my boyfriend's birthday that day, and I promised I'd cook him a special meal. But when I came in, he was actually having a nap. So I thought, okay, I'll join him. So I just lay in bed, And I'm not being dramatic, but I genuinely thought I was going to die because my heartbeat was so slow that it was just like I was fading away. And I lay in bed for a few hours, and then I managed to wake up my boyfriend and say, there's something wrong with my heart, we need to go to hospital. So he put me in a taxi, and I had private healthcare through my work. So we went to a hospital, and they initially thought I'd been having heart attacks with my really high heart rate and then my really low heart rate. But that got ruled out very quickly. But I was taken into A&E 3 times for that. I had 3 suspected heart attacks, but they can rule that out really quickly with a blood test. So it wasn't my heart. It turned out to be my liver. They found out I had a condition called hypertransaminemia, which is just the medical way of saying I had very high liver enzymes, like way beyond the normal range. So the doctors are immediately thinking that some kind of hepatitis, HIV, all of these kinds of viruses. So that was pretty scary.
Yeah.
And I got tested for a lot of those there, and they all came back negative, but they still didn't know what was wrong with me. But I was just pleased that I didn't have a heart attack. I wasn't having heart attacks because that was scary. But they didn't know what this virus was, but it was definitely some kind of virus. So I got discharged, and they said, we're going to keep monitoring you and see how like this progresses, or if it's just gonna pass. And so that was a bit scary. I had to be signed off work, and I ended up being in hospital 4 times a week for about a year, because when you go in for one appointment, you come out with 3 more. So if I go in to see the consultant, he or she would send me for an MRI or an ultrasound, and then blood tests, and then I had to make another appointment to see him or her again. So this went on for a year, and it affected my mental health badly, because I didn't know what was wrong with me. They didn't know what was wrong with me. But at the beginning, the doctors were supportive, because my stats clearly showed there was something wrong with me. So I knew I had this liver issue. I didn't know what had caused it. And I knew I don't drink. I very, very, very rarely drink, so I knew it wasn't alcohol. So that was also a concern for me, because I'm not a drinker. I don't touch illegal drugs. I'm very into like the athlete lifestyle. And from the doctor's point of view, they can't treat something if they don't know what's causing it. So they said, okay. I kept having these appointments, and so 4 times a week I was in hospital, and that was getting me down a lot. And then I started having problems again with my heart. They never really kind of went, but it was always worse at night, and I'd wake up screaming with chest pain, and I couldn't feel my left arm. So again, I was back in hospital, and I was fitted twice with a halter. Now, a halter it's like a little pack that you have attached to you, and it has pads, like if you're having a heart trace, but you wear it for 24 hours so that the cardiologist can monitor changes in your heart rate. And my resting heart rate came out at 143 beats a minute one day, and then on another time it came out at 42 beats a minute. So I was then diagnosed with sinus tachycardia and episodes of severe bradycardia. So, and I was like, well, what's causing this? Like, I was getting quite concerned, because no one really had any answers. And this meant I couldn't train because I was so weak. And then the night sweat started, and the breathlessness as well. I couldn't climb the stairs. I would be literally dripping. I'm only on the second floor where I live. We don't have a lift in my apartment block. And I would literally just go down to get the mail, and I'd come upstairs and I would be gasping for air. I couldn't breathe. So then it's back in hospital for lung scans and lots of other tests. I had an ultrasound of my heart, and they still couldn't pinpoint what it was. And the whole time, every time I ended up in hospital, the readings for my liver and also my CPK level was really abnormal. CPK is creatine kinase, I think you say. CPK, yeah. If you've got a lot of muscle, your level of CPK will be naturally higher. But I'm quite muscular anyway, but I lost 12 kilos in just under a month, and I knew I was really ill, but no one could tell me what was wrong with me.
Which is more scary than, like, it's even more scary when you don't
Yeah.
know.
And so how long is this over a year now? How far in timescale are we?
This happens that I started to get ill in about October 2017, and this went on until last September.
Okay, so
Yeah.
2 years, just over about 2 years.
Yeah, but then the physical side, then, which I'll come to, it was that long because of the effects on my mental health as well. So I saw the cardiologist. He didn't know what was wrong with me, and I felt like I was being like just sent from specialist to specialist, and everyone's saying, well, I don't know, so go and see this person. But I managed to track down. I did a search for the best internal medicine specialists in Madrid, and I managed to find a guy who had really good reviews. And I showed him all my test results, and he wasn't too concerned, but I was, because I always used to have really clear skin, and I was getting all these black marks on my skin was really marked, and I'd lost so much weight that all of my bones were protruded, and I'm not overweight anyway. So that was a concern for me. And I got to see this internal medicine specialist, and I said to him, look, I need to know what's wrong with me because I can't live like this. And I was pushing for a liver biopsy because, as I said, every time I had my liver enzymes checked, the readings were higher and higher. But at the same time, I tested negative for all kinds of hepatitis, HIV. I was misdiagnosed with glandular fever, which I definitely didn't have. And they just didn't know what was wrong. And he mentioned that he could do a liver biopsy, but he also mentioned that he didn't actually want to do it because it's very time consuming, and he asked me if I realized how much pain I'd be in, and I just said, I don't care, I need to know what's wrong with me.
Would that require to cut you and
So I'd had quite a bit of surgery before then anyway, so I wasn't too worried, but I wasn't prepared for the liver biopsy because I was put on an MRI scanner, and I did say to the nurses around me, are you sure I am the right person? You have got the right patient, right? Because I'm on an MRI scanner, and I thought I was having a liver biopsy. And she said, no, it's fine. This is how we do them. We just lay you down on here. So I was like, okay, that's fine, as long as they're not going to like cut off a limb or something. I just wanted to check that, and he reluctantly agreed. And I had the liver biopsy. I wasn't actually given sufficient anesthesia, so I could feel absolutely everything. And then I went into shock afterwards. That was horrendous. That was really awful. That was the most pain, I think. That's the most physical pain I think I felt in my life. And that's saying something, because back in 2010, I had viral meningitis. And at the time, the doctors didn't know if it was bacterial or viral. So I had to have a lumbar puncture where they insert a really long needle between the vertebrae in your spine and extract the liquid, because that's how they test for meningitis. And I screamed the hospital. I remember screaming the hospital down, and then the doctor came in. This is back in 2010. He said to me, "Teanna, I'm really sorry, but we didn't extract enough fluid. We're going to have to do it again." I have to laugh, otherwise I'll cry. That was until then, that was by far the most physical pain I had ever felt. But I wasn't given enough time for the anesthesia to work, so I could feel absolutely everything.
Oh,
and
you is it local anesthetic or general? Local?
Yeah, it was local. It was local. I could and I was saying, look, this doesn't feel quite right, and it's like, no, it basically needed longer to kick in. And also the actual procedure wasn't explained to me, and I didn't know that the needles are like this long, and they took 3 cylindrical samples from my liver. And I thought, I've had biopsies, I've had many biopsies before for various reasons, and I thought, okay, this is really, really painful, them going in. But once they're in, they'll take their 3 samples and it would be okay. But I didn't know it didn't work like that. They used 3 different needles, so I could feel every insertion and every extraction of each needle. And it was really, really painful. But also, because I had pushed to have this liver biopsy, I did not want to say stop, because I wouldn't have got the answers that I needed. And I was in hospital for a bit, and then I had a booked appointment with my consultant. This is the internal medicine specialist who didn't want me to have the biopsy in the first place. And I didn't think too much of it until I got a call and he asked me to come into his office. And I thought, okay, this doesn't sound good, because we've already got a booked appointment and he's asking me to come in. And I went in, and he sat me down and told me I had grade 1 liver disease, and I had necrosis throughout my liver, which means the cells in my liver would die in. And I obviously had a lot of questions, like, how the hell has this happened? What has caused this? It's grade 1 now, but like, what happened? Because they still didn't know what virus I had. And I would just say I was not patient 0 for COVID, nothing to do with that. But I was asking a lot of questions because it's my health and it's important, but that actually really annoyed him. And he gave me my results and said, okay, your liver isn't working properly. That accounts for the marks on your face, that accounts for your weight loss, etc. And yes, it could progress to stage 2, stage 3, etc. But don't worry, because that will be over time. And in worst case scenario, you'll have a liver transplant. And he was so blasé about it. It was like the most natural thing in the world for him. And I was like in shock. And bear in mind, this is all in Spanish as well, because no one speaks a word of English in this particular hospital. And I still had quite a lot of questions, like, what happens now? What happens with my treatment? He said, I'm not going to treat you. And I said, well, what do you mean? Because I don't want this to get worse. And he just lost his temper with me. He told me he had other patients to see in his waiting room who were really ill, and to get out of his office. And I left in floods and floods of tears and immediately made a complaint. Yeah, so
whoa,
that's insane.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So you didn't know anything about it. You just knew that you had a specific
I knew I had grade 1 liver disease. I had no idea how I caught it. I had no idea why the cells in my liver were dying. Yeah, because that's what necrosis is. Well, I made a complaint, and this was all, I did everything through the private system initially because it's a lot faster and I wanted to get back to work. But then I went to see my GP, and she put in an urgent referral to the public system to see an internal medicine specialist, because even she was like, this is not good. But because she's a general practitioner and not a hepatologist, she didn't quite understand all the terminology of the liver. So I was a bit annoyed with her initially because I wanted to be referred to the public system, but because I had private healthcare, she wouldn't actually put a referral through. Because although it's much faster, I had the Spanish version of Bupa, but the level of care is much better in the public sector. But now I'd basically been kicked out and told to find a different internal medicine specialist. She then sent an urgent referral to the hospital closest to me in my catchment area near where I live. And I was assigned a brilliant internal medicine specialist. She was really, really good and very, very thorough. But again, it was like in hospital 4 or 5 times a week, endless testing. And it really, really took a toll on my mental health, always being in hospital. Because my boyfriend would come with me to some of these appointments, and the hospital closest to me is a military hospital. It's now open to the public. Initially, it was just for the military. And he came in with me and he said, I physically can't sit in this waiting room. This is the most depressing hospital I've ever seen. And it's like, yeah, I'm here like 5 times a week now. But he was really, really supportive. He was really, really supportive. And as I said, I did have a brilliant internal medicine specialist, but I felt like I'd been poked, prodded and examined more than a laboratory rat, because I had so many ultrasounds, I had so many MRI scans, I had numerous x-rays, and the amount of radiation that's gone through my body over the past 2 years I don't even want to think about. But yeah, the internal medicine specialist at my local hospital took it really seriously. And she was actually very concerned about my CPK levels, because again, my weight was going down, but my levels were rising. But I didn't have any muscle. I was like skin and bone. And she had ordered, it was to have a thigh biopsy. And I was due to have I've got quite a large scar on my thigh. I had about 6 inches of my thigh, like depth wise, removed. It was so she thought I had a suspected muscle disorder. But before I had that surgery, she did say to me, you have been through an awful lot. I'd like you to see a psychiatrist. And I said to her, I've actually got my own psychiatrist and my own psychologist, because moving countries is really, really difficult. I was only in Madrid for 5 days before I had to start work. And I had no shame in saying I was struggling, like with the culture, with friendships and that kind of thing. And I was working a lot as well. And she said, okay, I know you've got your own team, but I'd really like you to see someone in this hospital. So I was like, okay, no, not a problem. So I welcomed any support, because it was getting to the point where my GP, who I had to see weekly to get my sick note to submit to my university, she was basically saying, it's all in the mind, there's nothing actually wrong with you, even though my test results said the complete opposite. And there is definitely there is without a doubt a link between body and mind. So, for example, when I get stressed, I get really bad headaches, and the muscles in my neck and my shoulders completely seize up. And that's what contributes to the headaches, because all of these muscles here in the back of my neck get really, really tense. And my psychiatrist, who I was seeing at the time anyway, he knew I was struggling with all of these tests and always being in hospital. But his attitude again was, this will pass, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
But the internal medicine specialist handed me the referral note, and I read it. It's a bit different to the UK, where when you get referred to someone, it's done, I think, electronically. It is done here as well, but there and then they will give you a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper it just said, patient looks sadder and sadder every time I see her. And I didn't think too much of it. And then my appointment to see the psychiatrist at that hospital was on a Friday. And really, this sounds really insignificant, but it's actually not. I never miss breakfast unless I have to have a blood test. I never miss breakfast. I get really hungry. I'm not one of these people who, can get to midday and realize, oh, I haven't eaten. And also, my boyfriend hates me waking him up in the morning. And that's also really significant because of what then happened. But that particular morning, I said to him, I've got my psychiatry appointment at the hospital, and I told him, because I've been to several hospitals for all these different physical examinations, I made a point that morning of telling him which hospital I was going to. It's the closest one to me. So I should be back within an hour. I went to, so I went, I wasn't worried at all. And I was taken to the room with this lady psychiatrist, and she asked me lots of questions about my past. We talked about how I'm coping now, and I said, yeah, it is really difficult. I am depressed, and I'm anxious, and I'm actually really concerned about losing my job. And that was causing me some paranoia, because I'd given up everything in the UK to come over here, and I did not want to lose my job. And I did everything I could to keep my university updated with what was happening to me. By Spanish law, you don't have to tell your employer what's wrong with you if you're on sick leave, but just so that he knew. Up until this point, I had said, "Oh, I'm in hospital for this operation or this biopsy or whatever it was." And the hard thing was, I never got a response back, and I found that really difficult, because I'm trying to keep the lines of communication open, trying to, let my director know that I really do want to come back to work, and I'm doing everything I can to get to the bottom of this. But I often didn't get any response back. So on the day in question, it was a Friday. I remember it being very cold. I sat down with this psychiatrist, and we talked about everything that had been going on. And she looks at me and she says, "Teanna, I've been a psychiatrist for 30 years, and I'm very, very good at what I do. But I've never met anyone quite like you." And I was almost about to joke, "Well, thank you very much," but I didn't. I refrained from doing that. And then she said, would you be okay coming to see my colleague for a second opinion? And I said, yeah, but as long as I can leave, because I've actually got another medical appointment at the other side of Madrid in about an hour and 15 minutes. And she's like, no problem. You can just have a word with him and leave. You can probably see where this is going.
Yeah. I am scared. Yeah.
So I had been in this hospital 4 or 5 times a week for a long time, and she was leading me through doors and parts of the hospital I had never seen before. And it didn't click at the time that to go through every one of these doors, you needed a card. So we go up to the 7th floor in a lift. We go up to the 7th floor in a lift, And at the time, I didn't notice that to get to the 7th floor, you don't press a button, you need a key. Okay, and we get to the 7th floor, and I'm taken in to see her colleague, and he immediately sectioned me under the Spanish Mental Health Act, and I wasn't allowed to leave.
Why?
So basically, I was sectioned for severe depression, anxiety, and paranoia. So my actual diagnosis was psychogenic psychosis. Basically, being the amount of stress I had to deal with led me to be psychotic, in their opinion. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't allowed to leave. And this happened on I was in complete and utter shock. I had all my belongings taken from me. My phone was turned off. They have a policy where you can't contact anyone for 24 hours.
Not even your partner, who's like
waiting for you,
like a massive part of your
life. Because he's not considered family, because we're not married and we're not in a civil partnership. Okay. So when they asked, do you know why you're here? And I said, well, actually, no, I don't, because I was told I was just coming to speak to you for a second opinion, and I have another medical appointment. And he said to me, you're not going anywhere. You are staying here. So they took all my belongings off me. My phone was turned off. All my underwear was taken away from me. All my clothes were taken away from me, and I had to wear these pajamas. And I was in complete and utter shock. And I thought, okay, well, what do I do here? I thought that the psychiatrist would speak to me, but in fact, he was in his office and he wouldn't speak to me. But what I didn't know is that my boyfriend, who isn't proficient in Spanish, had actually turned up at the hospital and refused to leave until he could speak to the psychiatrist. Yeah. He managed to get to level 7 because he kicked up such a fuss. He said, where's my girlfriend? She came here for a routine psychiatric appointment and I can't find her. Where the hell is she? I don't know how he's managed to say that in Spanish, but he kicked off enough. To be seen by the guy who sectioned me. And I didn't know this, and I wasn't even told that he had come. And yeah, I said, yeah, to be honest, I don't know why I'm here. And that probably wasn't the best thing to say, because it's the whole idea that if you're ill, you don't know that you're ill. But it was me who was saying, yeah, I'm not coping. I am paranoid about losing my job. And it was just, I didn't take, I felt like I'd been tricked, really, because the psychiatrist who claims she's very, very good and eminent in her field with 30 years experience clearly knew I was going to be sectioned. She didn't need a second opinion. She just needed to get me in the ward. But I wouldn't describe the place I was sectioned in as a psychiatric hospital. It was a military asylum. It was very, very different. I was put in a maximum security ward. And after all my stuff had been locked away and I was put in these pajamas, I went into this dining room. And in the dining room, you have a massive perspex screen, and you're just observed all day by some psychiatric nurses, some of whom should not be working in mental health, but likely are because they've passed a government exam, which means that they can't get fired and have really good pension benefits, because that's what most people want. That's the aim in Spain, really, to pass an exam called oposiciones, which means that the government have got your back for the rest of your life, basically, and you can't get fired. But some of them were really, really just lacking the empathy needed to work in mental health. So I'm still like in shock, and I go into this dining room, and they've got these really, really bright, luminous lights that hurt your eyes. The television is on really, really loudly, and there are just chairs and some really old magazines. So you had to sit there all day. And because I was sectioned on a Friday, I was literally observed through this Perspex screen until Monday. So the day would go like this. You get woken up at 7 o'clock in the morning. You are you're not allowed to have your own like shower gel. So they give you sponges that have already got they're actually pretty good, I guess, for traveling for jiu-jitsu. They're sponges that've got the shower gel already in them, and then they react to water. So they watch you wash, they watch you shower. Because I had the liver issue that made me sweat a lot, I always wear deodorant. Wasn't allowed deodorant unsupervised. They had to keep it locked away in the cupboard in case I don't know, squirted it in my eye or something. And it was absolutely horrendous. After we showered, we would have breakfast, and I don't eat any Spanish food at all. So for the time I was there, I lived on bread, water, and orange juice, and the odd piece of fruit.
What do you mean Spanish food? I mean, why is that?
The omelette,
I don't eat any Spanish food at all, but to be fair, I don't eat much British food. I eat really plain, boring food like chicken, roast chicken, white rice, for example, or sweet potato, roast chicken. I've always been a bit funny with food. I don't like what I call complicated food, but I'm not. And no offense to any Spaniards, I just don't like Spanish food at all. Yeah. And so we'd have breakfast. Breakfast I was kind of okay with. I would drink some orange juice and I would eat a bread roll. And then from 8 a.m. till 2 p.m., you just had to sit in the dining room because your bedroom would be locked. Your bedroom would be searched every day. And I know they were quite concerned about me because my diagnosis, as I said, is psychogenic psychosis, which means...
Can you explain what the difference?
Yeah, so there are actually many, many types of psychosis. Mine is caused by immense stress. Back then it was basically you could say a normal reaction to an extraordinary amount of stress. But if you have drug-induced psychosis, that's the most common one. Right. So when I first went in there, I was immediately drug tested. Both urine and blood samples were taken from me, and they came back clear. But I don't know what everyone else's diagnosis were, but there were a couple of other people there as well with drug-induced psychosis. So there's drug-induced psychosis, stress-induced psychosis, or you could have, for example, a woman who has never had any mental health problems in her life, and after she has a baby, she develops postnatal or postpartum, as they say, postpartum psychosis. So it can come out of nowhere. It really, really can. I did not know you could get psychosis from stress. It's something I had attributed to drug use.
Yeah. Can I just ask though, because to section someone,
yeah,
my understanding, which is limited, is that you have to be like a danger to yourself or others. Is that right or wrong? Because is that right?
Yeah, but it was, they were worried about my paranoia, but
so they thought you're paranoid because it seems like you were like in a space where you were like, no, I'm aware that I'm got paranoia. I'm worried about these things. It seems quite extreme to me to then take it. Kind of feels like it's taken out of context.
Yeah, Absolutely. That's exactly how I felt. And I think it's also to do with my background from when I was in the UK, but all of that's like things in the past, because I had problems with food in the UK. And I think because of, I think it's also to do with the stigma as well. They do take mental health issues quite seriously here, just people just don't talk about them. There are lots of different types of psychosis. Also, if you've been in, for example, in a car accident and you have a head injury, that also can lead to psychosis, because the way your brain works changes due to trauma to the brain. Whereas in my case, it was just so much stress that I was taking on, and I was so worried about losing my job, so worried, and it just became a real downward spiral. And I couldn't train either, because training is my coping mechanism. Where some people drink or take drugs or whatever, party, whatever they do, training is how I deal with stress. But because I was so physically unwell, I couldn't train.
So
and that
what was happening with your physical health, like your liver issues, whilst you were in this, place? Like, because you'd missed
absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Yeah, absolutely nothing. So I didn't get treatment for my liver. And I mentioned this, and they said, okay, because it's only grade 1, we are going to monitor you. I did have periodic blood tests to see if what was happening with my liver enzymes, and they did start to go down. So for that, because I was medicated against my will, they were not too concerned about my liver at that time. But it was monitored, because they did know that the problem wasn't in my mind in terms of the physical issues I'd been having. And that was all documented. And because my readings were going down, they didn't feel the need to treat me. And also, while you're sectioned, it's quite rare for you to have any kind of other surgery, because I was actually scheduled to have my thigh biopsy while I was sectioned, but they refused to do it because I was sectioned, and that would mean I would have to lay down. And as I said, that our doors were locked as soon as we got up in the mornings, and our rooms were searched. So as soon as they've been searched, the doors were locked, and we had to sit in this dining room. So I thought, okay, I'll try and talk to some of these people who are in here. There are a couple of people who were completely non-verbal. I have no idea what was wrong with them, or what had happened to them. Other people just did not make any sense at all, and you couldn't hold a conversation with people, because they were really, really ill. And I was aware that I wasn't well, but I don't believe that I needed to be put in a maximum security, I want to say psychiatric unit, but it was an asylum. There's no other way.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
That would have been like
the worst ever experience that anyone could have.
All of your power was taken away. Like, that's really awful.
As I mentioned, I got sectioned on a Friday.
Yeah.
And I thought the psychiatrist would be there, but it's Friday, so he wasn't in on Saturday. He wasn't in on Sunday. So those 2 days, it was just being observed through a Perspex screen.
Hold on. Did your boyfriend manage to talk to him on Friday?
Yes, on the Friday he did.
What did he say?
Do you mean the psychiatrist or my boyfriend?
Yeah. So did the psychiatrist talk to the? Sorry. Did your boyfriend spoke with the psychiatrist to find out what's happening?
Yeah, but they didn't tell me that he'd been in, which didn't sit very well with me. But he knew, yeah. And when I had explained time and time again, look, I don't have any family here. I'm here on my own. It's just me and my partner. Please, 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 can I call him? And when they finally relented and gave me my phone, I was shaking so much I couldn't even remember my PIN number to make a phone call, because I don't know his number off by heart, because I don't know anyone's number off by heart except for like my parents' landline.
I don't know anyone's number
not
too.
Since the days when you had to know it, because you had to be able to borrow dial it.
Yeah, but being super organised from work in academia, I actually had it written down in my diary. So a disgruntled nurse agreed to open the cupboard where all my stuff was stored. And I got out my diary, made a note of the number, and I called him from the hospital. They let me use, because my phone was blocked now because I couldn't remember the PIN because I felt traumatized. And he told me that he was still in the hospital because he refused to leave. And visiting hours, they have a policy where you can't have any visitors for the first 24 hours. But I got to see him, and he said, I've spoken to the psychiatrist, but they didn't tell me that. And actually on the Friday before the psychiatrist left for the weekend, my boyfriend came in with me, and we discussed why I was there, what was going to happen. But unfortunately, the way the psychiatrist is with family members is not the same as when you're on your own.
Right.
They want to make out, because families want to speak to the person in charge, which was him. They're all very nice and make out, we're here to look after your son, daughter, husband, wife, whatever. But it's a lot nastier when the family leave in how they talk to you. And because I do not eat Spanish food, my boyfriend brought up, well, what about food? Because she cannot, like, I physically cannot eat certain things because I'm terrified I'm going to be sick. And he was, and the psychiatrist said, yeah, that won't be a problem. That won't be a problem. And my boyfriend came to visit me every day at 4:00. And that's basically what I was living for in there.
How long did you stay in there?
It was a week.
Okay.
Which doesn't sound very long, but when your days,
it is long.
When your days are just sitting in a dining room being observed, and then basically you're given lunch, which I could never eat. And then you had to sit, we were allowed to lay down for 1 hour after lunch, but then our rooms would be locked again. So we had the weekend. I didn't get any support whatsoever. I was just medicated, and I don't know what with. On the Monday, I was called into the psychiatrist's office, and he said to me, oh, it's your court hearing. And I was like, what? It's your court hearing. So he had taken out a court order against me to keep me detained for 6 months. And this was just before the Europeans. And I could not believe it. I could not believe it at all. But it was very clear to me that there was a judge and 2 other representatives there. They'd had a chat before. That was very clear that they had a chat before I'd been asked into the office, and they'd already decided I wasn't going anywhere. And I sat down and I was like, right, hang on, this is a court hearing, but I've got no legal representation. And I was denied a translator based on the fact that my Spanish is good enough. But like, I had this feeling like, is this legal? Because it felt really off. And the judge spoke to me, and I explained how I was feeling in my own words. I wasn't a danger although I wasn't a danger to myself or to anybody else. His request for the court order to be taken out against me was granted, and it was for 6 months, and I had 20 days to appeal, and I had to appeal. So how can I appeal when I'm inside a hospital? And that's when it started to get really scary. That's when things changed a bit, because when I spoke to the psychiatrist about all this medication I was being given, I said, well, what are you giving me? And he said, I don't have to tell you that. You're here involuntarily. And I said, well, what about my rights? And he said, you don't have any rights. And again, I had this feeling in my stomach, like, is this legal? So I don't know at the time. I know now, but at the time, I had no idea what medication I was taking. And I was being medicated a lot. But it did help me sleep, so that was good. I could forget where I was. I was allowed to take in one book as long as it had nothing to do with mental health. And I got my boyfriend to bring in The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. Absolutely brilliant book. And it really does focus on mental health. But on the top, it says like #1 bestseller for leadership. So I explained to them in Spanish, look, it's a leadership book. But that was an absolute lifesaver in that situation. And to kind of cope with it all, I thought about what I would do in jiu-jitsu, because when I was a white belt and I used to get my back taken, I'd start thrashing around trying to get the choke off, but by thrashing around and panicking, that actually made the choke go on tighter. So a lot of the skills that I've learned on the mats, I had to apply in hospital off the mats. I said to my boyfriend, I desperately need to speak to the emergency British consulate in Madrid. So when people come to visit you, there are lockers by the main door, and I don't know if visitors are searched, but they're not allowed. I know they're not allowed to bring you any food or anything like that, and you have to put your phone. That visitors have to put their phones in these lockers. Yeah. And I said to my boyfriend, you need to bring your phone in. And my bedroom was locked, but the toilet was separate. That was outside. Obviously had no glass because it had no mirror. Didn't need a mirror anyway, but it's obviously a maximum security ward. And I remember my hands were shaking. I called the emergency British consulate, gave them my date of birth, told them what happened, where I'd been detained, and the nurse started banging on the door saying, get off the phone. All phone calls have to be agreed by the psychiatrist. Found out later that's completely untrue. That's not true at all. I also said to one of the nurses, I have a routine psychology appointment tomorrow, the following day. Can you please tell my psychologist that I'm unable to attend so he can offer my appointment to someone else? And she said to me, yeah, we'll do that. And we'll let your psychiatrist know you're here as well. And I was like, okay. Later on, I got called into the psychiatrist's office again. He was really, really angry with me. He said, because the consulate kept ringing him saying, what the hell is going on? What are you doing to this patient? Why is she there? And how are you treating her? Because my boyfriend had a number of conversations with the British consulate, and I wasn't eating, and my weight was going down. and I was trying to do like triangles on the floor in my bedroom though, because they already thought I was away with the fairies, if you like. So it was really, really worrying, the idea that I could have been in there for 6 months. That's what really scared me. And yeah, my psychiatrist was really the hospital psychiatrist was really angry, and he said in this really like angry to aggressive tone, never have I had a patient who has received so many phone calls, but they were all from the consulate to check what they were doing is legal, and to be honest, I still don't know if a lot of it is. One of my best friend, one of them, Serena, who's loved me when I've been at my most unlovable, I know her from university. She's trained to be a clinical psychologist, and she said to my boyfriend, you know, having a court hearing without legal representation or translator, I'm not sure that's legal. But she was brilliant in supporting my boyfriend. My boyfriend also knows a psychiatrist. And he was also getting support from a mutual friend of ours who sadly passed away in July this year, and she was a mental health specialist as well. So, but she was really, really good to him and to me when I came out, actually. And I ended up getting transferred to what was meant to be a lesser security ward, and it was better in the sense that you weren't watched when you were showered.
So how did the 6 months, the appeal for 6 months, how did that go away?
Well, basically, the standard court order is for 6 months. And I was saying to them, I can't be in here for 6 months. I can't be here for 6 months. And they were saying, my boyfriend was there at the time, so he was trying to reassure me reassure me as well. But I'm not sure he knew himself that they have the power to let you go, let you stay, and that's a scary amount of power. But they said the 6 months is like a standard thing they give for every patient, and then if they still feel you are too unwell to leave after 6 months, it will be reviewed again. But for most people, it's nowhere near that long, and in my case it wasn't, but I didn't know that at the time.
So can I get the timescale right? So you were there in the end for a week. So at what point were you transferred to the lesser security?
I think it was after I went on the Friday. I think it was after about 4 or 5 days.
Okay.
And this ward had a different psychiatrist, and the people on this ward, you could actually have a conversation with them. They were nowhere near as severely mentally ill as the people in the ward I had just moved from. I realised though that about this is where the stigma with mental health professionals really came out, because we were asked to decorate the ward, or if we wanted to, we could make something for ourselves. And I decided so they had like loads of crafts and wrapping paper, obviously no proper scissors. They had to give us like the scissors you give to children because, you know, we're not well. And I made a square, and I covered it with gold wrapping paper, and I got some gold ribbon. I needed a stapler, so I had to be supervised using the stapler in case I stapled my eye or something. And I made a European medal, and it had my name on it, and it had my weight category, it had my belt, and it was gold because I wanted to win the Euros. And it was so for those people who made something for themselves, like I did, I made 2 medals and I actually flew out to Lisbon with them. I know that sounds really lame, but in my hotel room, I like had them hung up. And I remembered, like, it was a reminder what I was fighting for, because after going through that, I felt like I could, I'll be all right coping with most things. And for those of us who had made something that we wanted to, rather than decorate the ward, we had to explain in an occupational therapy session what we had made and why. And when I know I'm not alone with this, when we talk about jiu-jitsu to people who don't know about it, they do the annoying karate chop arms. And I explained that I was due to compete in the Europeans really soon, and I'm going for gold. And I looked up one guy, the guy who I would say was the most well there, aside from myself. He just raised his eyebrows, and I noticed one of the nurses rolling her eyes, and that's when it hit me. They think I'm delusional, and that's actually when I got my discharge notes. That's actually what was said in my report. And I did do the Europeans, and I didn't win gold. I won silver. So the difference was the colour of the medal, and I didn't know that a white belt is not a square, it's a circle. And when I won silver, which for me, like, metaphorically was like winning gold after that, I almost wanted to go back to the hospital and say I was not effing delusional, but I didn't. I didn't do that. But it was really hard because things that you said, you weren't believed. Like, people didn't believe you. And so I just thought I have to just cope the best I can. But my weight was going down a lot because I couldn't eat. And I was threatened with being tube fed, which just really scared me. And one day, because my drug tests were all negative, no drugs at all in my system, illegal ones anyway. Obviously, they were medicating me there. We were in the dining room one day at lunch, and I was just kind of sat there because I couldn't eat anything. And the nurse said, "Oh, Teanna, you're having a TAC tomorrow." A TAC is a CAT scan, brain scan. And we'll call her Lucia, who was actually a doctor. She was like a fully qualified doctor, so it must have been really difficult for her to be in there. You're having a TEC. A TEC is electric convulsive therapy, which I thought was illegal, and it's not. And that's when I went, this is when I started to get really scared. When I was like, whoa, am I having a TEC or am I having a TAC? And the nurse said, no, Teanna, you're having a TAC. Lucia is having a TEC. So, electric convulsive therapy, sending electricity through your brain, completely legal. And because you're detained involuntarily, you don't have a say whether you can't say I don't want this. You don't have any rights according to them. And that never really sat well with me. And that's when I realized I need to get out of here, because I am not having electricity put through my brain. That's when I really, really realised the seriousness of what was going on. And I told my boyfriend as soon as he came to visit. I was in a bit of a state because I was so scared that I might end up having electric convulsive therapy. And he spoke to his friend who's a psychiatrist in the UK, and he said, no, it is legal and it's actually pretty effective. And I was like, I don't care. I don't know enough about it. That's not even an option. Like, I need to get out of here. And And the next day I had my CAT scan because everything was clear for drugs. They wanted to check there was no abnormality in my brain that was causing my symptoms. And walking through the hospital, you had to be escorted by 2 security guards the whole time. And I realised that people who were in the hospital anyway and were being sent to other wards for other tests, they wore different pyjamas to us. We had like the psych pyjamas, so that if we're seen like if you're seen wandering around on your own, people know to like make sure security take you back to where you should be. But the looks from, and this definitely wasn't paranoia, the looks and the nudging from the doctors who were in the canteen who saw us, that definitely wasn't in my mind. There really is a stigma within the medical field with certain conditions. There is, and even speaking about it, I do get concerned that because I'm talking about it, it could be seen as it's quite easy to manipulate me, because it'd be very easy for someone to say, yeah, well, you were sectioned, you don't know what's real, you're paranoid, when really my thoughts and my feelings are based in reality and they're founded. They're not without foundation. So that was difficult, walking through the hospital, being escorted at all times, and but my brain scan came back clear, everything seemed okay. So it did seem that this just was severe anxiety, depression and stress that's led to psychogenic psychosis. The girl, Lucia, the doctor, I saw her afterwards, and she was bleeding from her mouth, and I said to her, what happened? And she said she had her tech, she had her electroshock therapy, but the doctors forgot to put the bit in her mouth that you're meant to bite down on. So she therefore bit down on her lip, and she just had blood pouring from her lip. And I was honestly like, it was just so hard to see. So hard to see, because even in the less secure ward, there were people there who were so far gone, it was genuinely really, really sad. And the people who were having electroshock therapy were just walking around like zombies, and I was so scared that was going to be me. But as I said, the psychiatrist on that ward was a lot nicer, she was a lot friendlier, and I am still pretty sure I got put there because the other one was sick of me, because my boyfriend kept turning up, demanding to know what was going on. The consulate kept calling him, and I think he just kind of wanted me elsewhere, which suited me fine, because I don't believe I should have been in a maximum security ward. And Madrid is a massive city, and I don't believe that with the symptoms I had, that hospitalisation was necessary. And I spoke to Serena, the girl I mentioned, from university about this, because she's in clinical psychology. And there are a number of studies that prove or support the idea that many people who are inpatients actually come out worse. And that's exactly what happened to me. One day I was called into the psychiatrist's office again, and she said to me, okay, I think I'm going to start giving you privileges. And one of those privileges would be to be able to walk around the grounds of the hospital. But because this is a military hospital, you've got armed guards on the gate, you've got barriers, you've got gates, it's very, very secure. But the public go there for a number of reasons. It's not just for psychiatric treatment. And so there were some people who'd been there quite a long time. They'd earned some privileges, and they could go for a walk in the grounds. And that particular day, my boyfriend came to see me. There was a woman who was allowed out during visiting time to walk around the hospital, but she had a car waiting. She jumped in the car, car drove through the barrier, smashed the barrier, and nearly knocked over one of the armed guards, because that's how badly people were being treated. Some of the stuff I saw was just it was incredible, really, because there were signs up in the wards that said, if you see any incidences of physical assault, make sure you report it, as in us, the patients. Who's going to believe us?
Yeah.
Who's going to believe us when we're in a psychiatric ward? No one's going to believe us. And I really feel strongly that there needs to be an investigation into what happens on that ward, particularly the maximum security one, because some of the stuff I saw, it's not nice at all. And then I think a day or two later, so my boyfriend saw that, and he said to me, "What the hell is going on in here?" And I was like, "I need to get out of here." And he was doing all the research he could about my rights and things. And it was very hard for him, because that's the only time I've known him to cry, and I've been with him 7 years, and I've never known him to cry. So that was really difficult, really, really difficult. And then I think, my last day in there, I got called in again to see the psychiatrist, and she said, and I thought she was going to say, "Oh, today you can go for a walk in the grounds." And she said, "I'm discharging you. You don't need to be here." And also, I did have a routine appointment with my normal psychiatrist the next day, and I had the slip in my diary, and I showed that to her. And she said, you don't need to be in this hospital. And when your partner comes at 4 o'clock, you can leave. And I was like, oh my God. But I didn't want to get too excited, just in case they turn around and change their mind. So when my boyfriend turned up that day, there were 6 police officers there, and he thought I'd basically just lost it and was practicing my takedowns on people, which I wasn't at all. That they were there for somebody else, and that had nothing to do with me. And I said to him, I'm being discharged, let's go now, because I did not want to spend another second there. And I got all my stuff, I got changed, picked up my phone, and I've never left a building so quickly in my whole life. Wow. He had cycled, and I was physically shaking as I ran out of that. I didn't walk, I ran out of that building.
Did you go to your normal psychiatrist afterwards?
The day afterwards, and because I had that appointment slip printed as proof, she said, "No, see your normal psychiatrist. You don't need to be here." And as I
say about the practice, about all of that,
I'll come to that in a second, if that's okay. But on my way out, I was literally running. Running. My boyfriend had cycled, but I was like, I'm getting the hell out of here. Wow. And I saw the girl I referred to as Lucia, the girl who had TEC, and the girl whose mouth was bleeding. And I gave her a big hug, and I wished her all the best. And she asked me, "How come you're leaving so soon?" And I didn't want to say, I don't need to be here, because I didn't want her to feel like, yeah, you definitely need to be here, because I don't know anything about what her diagnosis is or was. All I knew is that she was a fully qualified doctor. Yeah. So I just said, I just to be tactful, I just said, I've just made a significant amount of progress really quickly, and just left it at that. And she started crying because she was with her mum, and she was granted the privilege of walking around the grounds, whereas I was able to go home. And the thing that always got me was that home is 2 metro stops away, so we're talking about 10 minutes away from my house, so I was always so close yet so far. And the next day I went to see my psychiatrist, my normal one, and he looked on the system and he said to me, "Oh, Teanna, you didn't attend your psychology appointment." And I looked at him and I said, I've just come out of the hospital I was in. I was sectioned. He had no clue. So when I had said in the first ward I was in that I have I had an appointment with the psychologist, can they please let him know I'm not able to attend and offer my appointment to someone else? They also confirmed that my psychiatrist knew I was there. My psychiatrist had no idea, and he was really angry because he said, "You're my patient and I should have a say in what happens to you." And he was furious. He was absolutely furious. So quite unsurprisingly now, I have a deep distrust of people in the medical profession. Because it's just how it was all done. So firstly, the woman saying, the first psychiatrist saying, "Oh, come and, yeah, of course you can leave. You've got another appointment. I just want you to have a quick word with my colleague to get a second opinion." She knew I was going to be sectioned. I was told that my psychiatrist and psychologist both supported me being there, and they knew I wouldn't be attending appointments. That was completely untrue. So now when any medical professional says, can we have a chat, I get really, really anxious. Really anxious.
Of course.
Yeah.
What happened with your liver afterwards?
Oh yeah, what was going on with the original?
Well, I had my thigh biopsy. They managed to rule out a muscle disorder, but they basically concluded I'd caught a very, very rare virus that they couldn't name. And then very, very slowly, everything went back to normal, but very, very slowly. Right. So I decided to do a jiu-jitsu competition when I wasn't quite, just to see how I would be on the mats. And that's when I realised I still wasn't well. And I've got a blood test in a couple of weeks just to see how everything's doing with my liver. My breathing's okay now and my heart is okay now. But it was very, very strange because it went on for so long and they couldn't pinpoint what it was. So yeah, it's just extreme stress.
Do they know how that, like, do you know like what actually is happening in the brain when this extreme stress? Because I'm not surprised that like the amount of stress that you were under, the amount of uncertainty about your life, your well-being, you said at one point you thought you were going to die. Like,
yeah,
that amount of stress obviously has a massive effect on your brain. Like, do you know what actually happens to then cause some kind of psychosis?
No, to be honest, no.
And the psychosis came because of the stress of the health
issues. Yeah.
It's such
and with that came
Go on.
So with that came paranoia that I was going to lose my job.
Is that
so that all that together is not a good combination?
What does paranoia look like?
What does it feel like? What, like that extreme?
Yeah. What do you feel? What are the?
Yeah. I can't speak for everyone because everyone's symptoms are different, but when I start getting ill, well, I had my paranoia at that time was overwork. It was solely overwork. It's not something that affects paranoia. Is not really an issue for me now. Otherwise, I would have paranoid psychosis.
Okay.
I just have my diagnosis is still stayed as psychogenic psychosis, and I have episodes if I get very, very stressed.
Okay. What do
Yeah.
these episodes? How does that go? Like, what's the?
Yeah. I don't want to leave the house. I don't interact with people. I'm extremely quiet because normally I can talk for England and for Spain, actually, in 2 languages. And it's not what you think. And this is what people fail to realize. Like, psychosis is not always like somebody talking to an invisible entity, somebody shouting in the street, somebody who doesn't take care of themselves. It's not always like that. For some people, yes, it is. But for people like me, who have similar symptoms to me, it's not like that at all. When I was But shortly before I was sectioned, I was having severe panic attacks before work because I did not want to leave the house. And I felt like a complete and utter failure because I'd moved to a different country where we have 300 days of sun a year. Madrid is a beautiful city, and I do not want to leave the house. And also I forget that I've got a support network. So like Serena, who I mentioned, it doesn't occur to me to reach out to people. My boyfriend doesn't know when I'm unwell. That's how I wouldn't say mild because it's not always mild, but that's how much you can't tell, because looking at me, I don't look like somebody who has a psychiatric disorder.
Okay.
But when I do get ill, I do not want to be around people. I don't want to talk to people. I go very, very quiet. And the main thing is I don't want to socialize or leave the house. And that can be difficult because if I need to get food, if I need to do a food shop, but I don't want to leave the house, then that's a problem.
Right. So it's that severe that you don't even want to go to the shops. It's not that you don't want to socialize, it's that you can't be around other people at all.
Yeah, but it's not due to paranoia. I don't think I'm being spied on. I don't think I'm being kidnapped. It's nothing like that.
No.
But it's I think I'm quite naturally I'm an introvert.
Right.
I come across as extrovert, but I think that's because when you're a lecturer and you have to, talk to 200 odd students or whatever, you have to project your voice. You have to you have to in a way it's a performance, and that's what I found very, very tiring. I'd be in an absolute state in the mornings before work, but because I love teaching so much, after I taught a class I'd be fine. But I know when I'm starting to get ill because the main thing that starts first is I do not want to leave the house. And secondly, if I do leave the house, the amount of relief when I get in is indescribable.
And what do you do when these symptoms kick in? Do you have any sort of medication to make you feel better? Do you have techniques? What do you do?
Well, my diagnoses have changed over the years. It's anxiety, depression, and psychosis that are real issues for me now. I don't actually take any antipsychotics at all. I do take anti-anxiety medication, and I train jiu-jitsu. For me, not to, because when I say I can't leave the house, I will only leave the house for jiu-jitsu. But sometimes, if it's that bad, I won't even do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Because I can't do it.
Do you ever have you ever spoken about these with people in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, because actually, when I was sectioned, my boyfriend didn't know what to do. He's not proficient in Spanish, and our clubs were nowhere near as big as they are now. So he spoke to a couple of friends at other clubs in Madrid, and I think the general consensus was you need to go back home. And
why did you not come back to England at that time?
Do you mean, when you just said you need to go back home, do you mean go back home to England, or like you need to get out of the hospital?
Well, one of my boyfriend's friends said you just need to go back to the UK. This isn't good.
Right.
But I even when I was physically ill, didn't want to go back. I left the UK for a reason. If I'm going to be ill, I'd rather be ill in a sunny country. But if I couldn't speak Spanish, that would have been a problem. But ironically, at the time, I was teaching English for medicine and anatomy. So I actually, because I had to teach, I was always teaching in English. I had to be prepared to explain everything in Spanish in case the students didn't understand. So my medical vocabulary in Spanish is actually really good.
Nice.
That's useful.
Yeah, it was very useful. Yeah. But there was another guy who said he'd help my boyfriend because his uncle had been sectioned, but then nothing came of that. So when I came out and he told me this, I was like, okay, well, Spain is a country where you don't talk about mental health.
Yeah.
And that made me really sad.
There's many more countries like that, I think.
Yeah. But actually now the clubs have grown a lot.
Yeah.
And there are some really good people who we are much closer to. Some of them know I'm unwell, some of them don't. You'd never ever guess if I was unwell. Never.
That's what are the people who know that you are like that you get unwell, what's the general reaction, and how do they respond?
Well, when I told them I was ill, the most common reaction was like surprise, because I don't seem or act unwell. But because these are my friends, I don't use them as my therapists. And I think that's quite important. Is I'm seeing a lot of on Facebook, particularly at the moment, I'm with the gyms closing in the UK, I'm seeing a lot of posts where people are saying, talk about mental health. There are petitions going around for the government to reconsider the closing of gyms based on people's mental and physical health, and I completely support that. And I do believe that talking is really, really good, but people are generally quite scared of condition. I'm making a generalization here, I'd like to emphasize. Psychosis and schizophrenia, for example, are not the same as anxiety and depression. People still commit suicide because of severe anxiety and depression, so they're very serious in that sense. But because they are very, very common, much more common than people might want to believe, society is generally more accepting. Psychosis, when I did some work with Submit the Stigma earlier this year, and they asked me to write a piece anonymously about what I want people to know about psychosis, and that it can happen to anybody. It can happen to anybody. You don't have to look ill. You don't have to be homeless, the main thing is it does not have to be drug induced.
Can I just clear something up for my own understanding? What exactly is the difference between psychosis and depression, anxiety? Because I have an understanding of anxiety and depression, but psychosis is and I think a lot of people, maybe why there's so much stigma, is that they actually don't know what it is.
So they're scared to talk about it, and
they block it out, and then they'll have all these ideas of what it could be, and it's scary, and that's a massive problem.
Yeah, so basically psychosis is often a symptom of something else like schizophrenia, but like in my case, I don't have schizophrenia. I do have just stress-induced psychosis. With psychosis, your perceptions become very, very skewed. For example, what I'm saying now doesn't affect me, but this is quite a good umbrella way of describing it. With psychosis, you might feel that somebody's following you. You might be convinced that someone's trying to poison your food. You might think that you're being filmed. You might think that I don't know what else. You might think that your phone is bugged, for example. Okay. So if you present with those symptoms, you're automatically evaluated for schizophrenia, because there's, as I said, psychosis can be a indicator of schizophrenia. And again, there are different types of schizophrenia. Yeah. But with depression, you generally don't have those intrusive thoughts. I think that's definitely the main difference.
Yeah. Okay, that's really, really interesting. Like, because I guess it's the idea that you don't. Am I right in saying it's sort of like reality becomes skewed?
Yes, exactly. And with schizophrenia, because when people talk about I've heard people talk about schizophrenia and they refer to it as split personality. That's completely untrue.
That's
schizophrenia.
That's bipolar, right?
No. Split person.
Isn't that bipolar disorder? No. Oh.
No. Bipolar. Well, there's bipolar type 1 and bipolar type 2. If we go with the more common one, bipolar type 1, you have. Well, it's more colloquially called manic depression. You might be up really high for 6 weeks. You might spend a lot of money. Yeah, you have very high highs and very low lows. Schizophrenia is where you might have auditory hallucinations. You might think people are talking to you. You might think God is talking to you. You might think that if you have the television on, that message is specifically for you. When people refer to it as split personality, that's actually multiple personality disorder. It's completely different. It's a completely different diagnosis.
Thank
you.
Yeah, that's really, really important.
And how does all of these affect your training, the competition, your life? Like, do you feel that everybody's welcoming you? Do you feel that people are scared?
And also, just to add on, how does it affect your competency in those things? So, like, does it affect your work, like how you're working and training?
I'm currently on sick leave, but I actually did lose my job in January because I had ACL surgery and I lost my job. And because I was off for quite a long time with my physical issues as well, I lost my job in January. But then I sued for unfair dismissal and won, so that was good. But I didn't need that literally like a week and a bit after I had surgery because I couldn't walk. But in terms of training, just popping back to the anxiety bit, I've always felt that my anxiety was a little bit different to other people's, but I never felt able to say so because I didn't want it to come across as like, oh, I'm struggling more than you, or oh, I'm, my anxiety is more severe than you. It's not a competition of who is struggling more at all. But I did feel that my anxiety was it wasn't responding to, for example, mindfulness, journaling, and a lot of the yoga, for example, and a lot of the things that are so widely recommended. So for me, that was another warning sign that it was getting really quite out of control. If the doorbell rang, I would jump out of my skin. And it just felt like it was very, very severe. And I think the best way to describe my anxiety is, if you're watching, in a horror film where you hear that tense music, that's suspense because something is about to happen. you have that all the time, but you can't see the stressor.
Right.
So you just feel this, you like this.
Is it like
You feel like, sorry.
Is it like energy sort of constantly feels like it's like do you know what like because in my experience of anxiety is that I feel like I've got a bubble of energy and it just makes me feel like bzzz, and I'm like, oh my god, I don't know why and I don't know where, and it's making me feel really on edge. That's my experience. Is it anything like that? Because that's what it sounds like to me with the music, with the sort of the feeling of suspense of you constantly on edge.
Yeah, I don't, not entirely, but when I started competing, I realised this is how you know, when you're at the mat side and you're getting ready for the ref to do this, to motion you on the mat, that's how I feel all the time. So
Right.
competing for me is really good for me.
Is it because
really,
of like
really
you
good.
know where the stress is coming from? You're like, that's where I can, that's where the adrenaline is.
It's kind of just like another day at the office, because that's how I live every day.
Yeah.
And my boyfriend, who does not struggle with any of these issues, I've always been attracted to people who are the polar opposite of me. They mellows me out of it. But bless him, he's very patient. And he said to me that he's a black belt now, but when he was a blue belt, he went with his friend Dave to the Europeans, and they looked around the venue the day before, and he had to walk out because he was so nervous he was going to be sick. That's how I feel all the time, like I'm about to compete in the Europeans. So when I actually did compete in the Europeans, it was fine. It was fine.
Wow, the irony.
Yeah.
And so you've got some anxiety medication.
Yeah.
And do you have warning when you're going to have a sort of bout of, you're going to have your dip?
The anxiety, I would say, never truly goes. So that's always there. But I know when I'm going to start I know when I'm going to start being borderline psychotic. So I can take steps to make sure I don't have a full-blown episode.
What steps do you take? What do you...
I talk to my boyfriend for hours on end about what's on my mind. I repeat myself a lot to him, the stuff I'm worried about. He helps me see things in a more rational way. If I have medical appointments can make me feel very edgy because of what happened to me. So I talk to him about that. Poor guy needs a break though, because when I got out of hospital and I was racing home, I thought, right, that's it, it's over now. No, that was just the beginning, because of my nightmare started, and I also have PTSD. So I went into hospital with a set of symptoms, and I came out so much worse.
Right, yeah. Absolutely understandably. Like, I mean, shock and trauma do crazy things to your brain. Like, I don't know enough, but what I do know is I mean, because there's some people from shock, they freeze, don't they? They can sort of, and it changes the way things are linked. So it actually can reform your brain a little bit.
Yeah. But I think in society generally, the question with psychiatry shouldn't be what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
Because people say, oh, what's wrong with him? What's wrong with her? And also, I think society doesn't really distinguish between forensic settings in psychiatry and settings such as I was in. When I say forensic settings, I mean, for example, if somebody is arrested because they've committed a crime, they will be put usually in a forensic setting, because especially if the crime was motivated by mental health problems. The most I think well-known example of that would be Broadmoor, the very high level psychiatric hospital. And when I did speak to one of my boyfriend's friends who knew this was going on at the time, and he happened to be very high up in the police, and the questions he was asking me was so typical of what somebody like him would ask, in the sense of, were you being aggressive? Like, he was asking me why I was sectioned. Were you being aggressive? You know, were you this? Were you that? So, because I have no doubt that he's had to. In the UK, it's called a 13-6, where you're sectioned by the police for your own safety or to prevent harm to others, etc.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that he's had to issue a lot of those. But my psychosis was not. I did not need to be in a maximum security setting. And I wasn't in a forensic setting anyway. But in the UK, there are a lot more things in place, such as community psychiatric nurses, CPNs. There's a lot more emphasis on care in the community to keep people out of hospital. But don't get me wrong, there are some people who do need to be in hospital, and I'm by no means saying that people shouldn't be sectioned. Sometimes they definitely need to be for their own safety, and I know there have been cases where families have begged, and even the individual has gone into A&E and said, I need to be sectioned, I do not feel safe. And sometimes that hasn't happened. But I also think the question, how are you, is a greeting rather than an actual question. So I'll say to my friends, no, how are you really?
Yeah, because normally, how are you? Yeah, fine.
or people say, how are you, and they don't even listen to the
But
yeah.
I'm just thinking of, like, you know, there are a lot of illnesses, and like there's a couple like that take a long time to diagnose. I mean, endometriosis for women, I think it takes up to 9 or 10 years to get a diagnosis of a really, really painful, can be very painful, debilitating problem. And hearing about your experience having, you know, a stress-induced psychosis, like, I wonder, I mean, I don't know, I wonder if all of those people who are going through those long, drawn-out health problems, like, are they getting the support they need? I know in some situations they might be, maybe in cancer, because that's like, it's well established, it's like, this is a big scary deal, whereas other issues where it can take so long, I wonder if there is this psychological support, or the recognition that is going to be really impacting their psychological well-being. And I mean, like,
actually on Sunday I actually interviewed a girl I know who has MS. She got diagnosed at 32. She has not been given any mental health support at all.
Really?
And she only got diagnosed in June, but she's very young, and it's obviously a degenerative disease for which there is no cure. And she hasn't been because that was one of my questions when I interviewed her. Have you been offered any mental health support? She's not been offered anything.
That's crazy. Because that just, from, if there's, you know, one takeaway from this, is that, you know, fear, like being worried about your physical health is terrifying, and when there aren't answers.
And also to always think about the mental side of things, because although we can see things, things are taking place in our brains, and we need to equally account for that, and like be more mindful.
Yeah.
That's really, and so how are you, how's your COVID experience? Because the other thing I was thinking of is, obviously, like, whilst we're having lockdown, and whilst, you know, well, you know, the last like year has been a crazy time, people's mental health will definitely be suffering. Like, that's undeniable, that there's a massive mental health crisis. Like, it's crazy. How do you see that impacting long term, and how has it impacted you?
I think long term for other people, I think will definitely have an impact, even on people who are like, that would never happen to me. No, life has a funny way of proving you wrong. So it's really something to be aware of, even if even if anyone listening to this cannot relate in any way to what I've said about anything at all, then I consider them really lucky because they haven't had to go through what I've gone through. But I think the idea that it will never happen to you is quite a naive one, because you never know what's around the corner. With regards to myself, I couldn't walk when COVID hit because I had had surgery, and my boyfriend had to carry me to the bathroom, and I was laid up in bed the whole time. But then we ended up moving our bed into the living room and matting the bedroom so that we could train.
Okay.
Carefully, of course, because ACL surgery is no joke.
No, not at all. Okay, so have you felt like it's been an okay experience for you? Because I guess one of your symptoms is that you actually don't want to be around people if you're getting an episode.
Yeah, I don't have episodes all the time. They come and go.
Yeah.
But I'm really comfortable in my own company, and that can be seen as healthy or unhealthy. But equally, I know people who have to be around people all the time, and I actually consider that quite unhealthy. The inability to sit with your own feelings and sit with your own thoughts. If you need to escape that by always being around people, I don't personally think that's healthy. But in the same vein, being on your own all the time isn't healthy.
Yeah.
And
social media is making this a little bit more confusing, because where you wouldn't want to be by yourself and you would always want someone next to you, then you have social media to trick you
It's sort of
to,
like
to have some kind of a company.
it sort of satisfies a little bit of the social desire, doesn't it? Because it's also a huge distraction. It's like you go into a bit of a when you go into an Instagram hole, like you're on it and you're like, oh my god, it's been half an hour. Like and it's sort of like it's quite an addictive. It's like a little bit of a drug.
it's digital cocaine, social media.
Oh my god, yeah. And it's like, I think that it sort of satisfies a little bit of your social thing.
Yeah.
I know.
God. Wow.
Yeah.
That was intense. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. That's like really, I think that talking about this is one of the best ways to talk about it. Like, get people to see and understand.
And also the advice of never talk about that is so shit.
Is that so?
Why would you just hide something?
I won't know. I won't say on the podcast who it was, but you'll know the person.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
That's even worse.
So the idea of I like to believe that the taboo of talking about general mental health is changing. It seems like there's still quite a lot of stuff to do with just sort of like moving away from the stigma of stuff like psychosis, because that's less understood. Do you think there are places in the world where it is better dealt with? Do you know of any?
Possibly the US, depending on state, possibly. But to be honest, that's not something Actually, I think maybe the UK, because my friend who sadly passed away, she mentioned trying to get a transfer from Madrid to her hospital, because she said I would be treated completely differently there. I would be treated well.
Right.
But that's because I've tried to connect. I was really brave and asked one of the admins on the UK BJJ Underground to anonymously post on my behalf, because I was so worried and scared about the reaction.
That's not a very good group to wait for a good reaction.
it can be a little bit unforgiving, but I was really surprised by the responses. Nobody who replied has psychosis, because my post was about connecting with people who have, I say ideally stress-induced psychosis, because mine wasn't caused by drugs. And how they cope around competition time and how they cope with their training. And there wasn't anybody, but just in general, the response was really, really positive, and people commended the guy. They assumed I was male for speaking out and being courageous and brave. Maybe probably thought I was male because there's simply more men than women in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
That's really nice to hear, because like I think that I'm really, really, really grateful that you shared your story.
Yeah.
I think that it is really brave, and I think it's really, really hard thing to do, but I think that without a doubt it will help so many people.
I hope so, because I can't be the only one.
No, you definitely aren't.
No. But if the general idea is don't talk about it, imagine how many people are not talking about it
and desperately need to, and also need to know that I think one of the worst things about mental health is that it is the sort of reaching out for help and being worried about what help you'll get, if it's like actually helpful, and also people not believing you because they can't see it, people being like not taking you seriously when you're like no, like I'm in pain, like I mentally feel like I'm in pain, or whatever your symptoms are, and knowing that knowing that there are other people with the same issue, it kind of normalizes it, and I think that's a massive problem, is that it's so othered. It needs to be shown to be like it's just some people have this thing that's happening, and it needs to be taken seriously, and know that as anyone can get it. It's like for some people it is something that I once read that some like a lot of illnesses, like mental illnesses like schizophrenia, with time, if it's left, some people might have a bout of schizophrenia for a year of their life and it will automatically resolve, because it's just something that weird, that sort of something happened, and then it naturally gets dealt with. But sometimes society, like people are too quick to like, in our culture it's like, oh, there's an issue, got to deal with it, here's some medication, and then people are on medication for the rest of their lives. And that is something that I've read, and I definitely am not a doctor, and I definitely, happy to be just, told I'm wrong if I am, but that makes sense to me, because our minds are like amazing things, and like it's actually mental illness. I think a lot of people have to different degrees. Some people seriously, and some people struggle with anxiety, and that is a serious thing, and it can be awful. But some people have a bit. They just have a bit about certain things, but that's just on the scale. It's still
And also we need to think and remind ourselves that anything can happen. Like you don't know, from your environment, from like different factors can affect your mental health, and
in ways you don't even
know. Absolutely. When people have asked me why I got sectioned and what happened, I do think it can be a genuine question, but I think they are also evaluating themselves at times to see how likely it will be that they will end up sectioned. And I don't have the answer to that, but it's pretty easy.
That's what has struck me most, is that, I mean, from what I can see, it just sounds like there was no actual reason. Like, I mean, it sounds like it's extraordinary to me that you were sectioned at all. And it's very, very scary to think that you can be in an environment which is your safe space. It's where you're opening up. It's where you're really digging deep into your psychology, into your soul, into, you're talking about really difficult things. And to then feel like that's not handled appropriately is it's not okay at all. And so, it can happen to anybody.
I mean, I freely admit I wasn't well. I wasn't well at all, but I did not need to be treated in such a maximum security setting that has left me with so many more issues.
I think
Yeah.
that's the bit. That's like
than before.
the fact that you came out with more issues is like if that just stood alone, that's clearly an issue. That's like clearly a big problem with the system.
Yeah.
So Teanna, that you're the best person to ask this question. What are you fighting for?
What am I fighting for?
That's gonna
In
be
life, do you mean?
yeah.
Yeah, in general.
In life. What am I fighting for? Well, that's a really good question.
Yeah, and for you, I mean, yeah, I think
I'm fighting for the will to never, ever, ever give up.
Okay.
that's great. That's great.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, and thank you so much for opening up. And
Thank you for inviting me on. I appreciate it.
No, pleasure. It's such an important thing to talk about. Thank you.